The Clear Signal with Steve Visscher.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to this second of the 2025 series of The Clear Signal. Great to have you with us. I've vamped up the studio here a little bit, trying to get into this YouTube vibe. Clearsignal.com.au, of course, is the website. If you're listening to the audio version, of course, you can find this on all of the major podcast platforms, of course. And I'm trying out the YouTube thing, as I mentioned. So I've had quite a good response to the first video that I put up there with John Kiriakou. He was a lot of fun to talk to, and I'm really looking forward to catching up with him again a little bit later in the year. As we record this, it's April of 2025. In fact, it's late April. And here in Australia, that means that there's only a week or two left of the federal election campaign. It's been a bit lackluster, I think. Probably not the most exciting one we've had. And you'd have to say that it's not going all that well for one particular side, which some people will be happy about, and I'm sure others will be not so happy about either. I think a lot of it comes down to communications styles. And if you've listened to any of my work over the years, you'd know that that's something that I'm really passionate about. We saw last year, of course, in the 2024 US presidential election that Donald Trump and his side used what I might term as non-traditional sources of media to great effect. It seemed to work really well for them. I was curious to see if that might spill over here into this federal election. It turns out that it really hasn't. So I thought we might have a bit of a chat about that. Last year, of course, we had Nick Hayes on. Nick is from mediastable.com.au. He's a journalist, a media analyst, a media expert. He lives and breathes this stuff. And I recorded a quick conversation with him where we talked about a lot of these issues just to see where it's all at and get his take on it. Nick joins me now. Nick, it's great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Steve, great to be here with you.
Well, as we record this for historical reference, we're about a week and a half out now from the Australian federal election here in 2025. The last time we spoke, we were talking about the success, I thought, of non-traditional media sources in the way they were used in the US election cycle. I think the Republicans latched onto that and used it pretty well. The Democrats stuck to, I think, a more traditional methodology, if you like. Well, I guess we all saw the results of that. I thought that might actually spill over here. I thought some of the parties might have taken some cues from that. That has turned out thus far not to be the case.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Steve. I think that there is a crossover between legacy media and social media big time for this current election. I think previous elections we'd seen a lot of the parties have a dabble in it, have a go, but neither party, both Labor or Liberal, were very good at it. It's partly because the very proponents of those parties are sort of more yours and my age, Steve, in that we're not completely au fait with everything social, but it was also the fact that the parties didn't necessarily, not just they didn't understand it, they didn't trust it either. I think both parties, both Labor and Liberal, have done fairly well at trying to break into that audience. They're going after those post-millennials, into the generations in the 18 to 30-year-old bracket in that TikTok, Instagram, short form social media space where they're trying to get the attention. They're having a crack. They're not particularly good at it, but they're there.
I think they're still 10 years behind, Nick. I noticed just this week now, in my case, the Liberal Party just seems to be flooding my social media with ads this week trying to promote their side of things. Well, that's a strategy that might have worked 10 years ago, I think. But I can tell you, I've got some contacts that are quite deep within that party that have told me the ruling there is a flat no when it comes to talking to anyone else but mainstream media. It's the old thing. They want to control their message, and they're very risk averse, as you say. But, we need to see some people as they really are, not just a prepackaged bunch of sound clips. It's quite frustrating.
Yeah, I so hear you, Steve. I think you're spot on the money there, because particularly the Liberal Party, where Peter Dutton seems to be running a very presidential style of campaign, where it seems to be him and him alone up and about in the media, and it seems to be a bit of a waste, because I'll give you he's the opposition defence minister in being Andrew Hastie from Western Australia, an ex-SAS captain, soldier, someone who is very prolific when it comes to questioning our safety, our sovereignty, our defence systems. comes to the very government in place that's there now. But we haven't heard boo from him. And I think that that's a big mistake from the Liberal Party, is that they seem to be just running that very Donald Trump presidential style of approach when it comes to legacy and traditional media, but not using the very assets that they have amongst them. And that's a real disappointment, because it doesn't allow for the people, the public, to actually see it's not just Peter Dutton. Australians aren't like Americans. We don't look at the Prime Minister as a president. We look at the party as a whole as to whether they're able to go away and govern us for the next 3 years. And it seems that the Liberal Party haven't used any of their other assets there. Are they any good? Some of them, maybe not so good. But Hastie's a really interesting one.
Hasty.
I mean, he is brilliant at what he does. Now, from a recent article in the West Australian, is just all I can see is that he's campaigning in his local area. He's probably spent around $30,000 in advertising on Facebook, but that's about it. And I think that's just a big waste from the Liberal Party.
I think it's a real misgoal politically too, because if you talk about Hastie as an example, as you say, there's a man with an outstanding military pedigree, and we are in some serious times where the Chinese are sailing their ships off our coast virtually unopposed. I mean, there's some really important messaging that someone like Hastie could speak with authority from. They should trust him and let him out there into the marketplace if they really want to make an impact.
And that's worked so well for the Liberal Party in the past. They've always worked on security, fear of invasion. It has been a sort of a fear campaign that they have always done very well out of. And you only have to look back a couple of elections there, Steve, in the boats, stopping the boats. And that sort of kind of approach where defending the very shores of Australia works well for the Liberal Party. And that's where a lot of their members, a lot of the people that will vote Liberal, but that also attracts those that do live in that sort of element of fear around whether we could be taken over. And immigration is a big issue, and it should be running, and it has been running right across the election, but it just hasn't had much of an impact. This security and this ability to roll out Hastie is someone who would have been a great asset for the Liberal Party, but they've, as you say, it's a missed goal. It's an own goal by the Liberal Party.
I think it is. And you think of the way they're going in the polls, if we can believe what the polls are telling us at the moment, Dutton is not going to pull this off. I would argue probably he would have struggled anyway. I think it would have been a huge ask for him. But, I think I find it frustrating they're just going back to this same old approach. And if you contrast that to the Labor Party, I don't think they've really engaged in non-traditional sources either. I get the impression, and it probably is a fair one on their part, they probably don't need to. Not as things stand now.
No, I think probably the wise advice to Anthony Albanese would be just to shut up and let it go now, because Peter Dutton has pretty much put his foot in it just about at every chance and opportunity that he does get to speak. I kind of do feel sorry for Peter Dutton. I actually mentioned this on a TV piece I did recently, is that it doesn't matter what he's doing at the moment. It all seems to be falling over. And I'll go back to that first chat that you and I had, Steve, with the looking into the way Donald Trump went about it. Donald Trump's handbook would have been very good for Peter Dutton. And coming off the back of that significant win by Donald Trump in the US elections only late last year, that would have given him a lot of confidence to move forward with that approach. Really hit hard on conservatism, really hit hard on and even attacking wokeism. Seems to have been very big from the Donald Trump side. And a lot of conservative media was very buoyant at the start of this year, going, we're going to do very well out of this. I think, though, when Donald Trump didn't take too long to throw a few spanners in the works when it comes to pretty much attacking the entire financial systems of every country on the globe. And then we start to question really the validity and also the value that Donald Trump win had. And I think we all very quickly turned on that. And that was pretty much when the campaign for the Liberal Party was well in play. And they would have had to have pivoted straight away, going, we can't do this because we are going to go even worse than what we're now predicting.
I think so. I spoke with my last episode with John Kiriakou where we were talking about the way that's played out in Canada, for example, and the wave of nationalism that Trump has unleashed there, and it's actually negatively impacted the opposition there, who's also a bunch of conservatives. It's obviously made the Liberal Party here rather gun-shy. They don't really know what to do, it seems to me, but maybe at this juncture, as we record this, Nick, maybe it's time to look at strategy and try anything, throw something at it if they want to win.
Well, let's throw some policy, Steve. I mean, we seem to be bereft of policy in this election. I mean, some of the policies that were presented at the very beginning, they've all been softened by the Liberal Party. So they've gone in there with nuclear, that's softened. They've gone in there with the work from home, bringing people back to work. They've softened on all of that. That just demonstrated and showed weakness there from the beginning, and also that that topsy-turvy. Can we go with this? We're sort of playing it as we go, reading the play as we go, and that's not great. It's not a great look, particularly when you're looking for strength. You're looking for, in a world where financially and also the leaderships around the globe are in contention. It's you need strength and someone that's going to be able to handle, for instance, Donald Trump, someone that's not just going to quickly fall over, and that's where I think the Liberal Party has made a few mistakes in this campaign. But can I just say the biggest and the hardest thing I think for Peter Dutton has been the fact that we're sitting right here in the middle of school holidays. We've just had Easter, Anzac Day's coming. We've just seen, unfortunately, the passing of the Pope. There is so much competition and there's so much noise out there in the media streams that even getting good policies in front of the people is going to be very difficult just with the competition of what's going on in the media cycle. It's a pretty hard time to inform and educate people right now as to what they might do over the next 3 years when the media cycle is so busy at the moment.
One of the things I always talk about media is what I like to describe as the hyper-partisan aspect of it. And I think we're seeing, again, I don't know whether you'd agree, certain outlets are all dividing along their usual lines. We're seeing, ABC, Fairfax, Guardian, obviously they gravitate to the left side, Sky News, et cetera, will go to the right. I think one of the opportunities we have with a non-traditional media source, I'd like to think over time that'll actually become a more traditional media source, but we'll go with that title for now. That's an opportunity for people. One thing we all have our political biases. I have mine. I'm sure you have yours, but I want balanced discussion, and we just don't seem to see that in modern media, not only here in Australia, but really anywhere around the world that you look.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I was only discussing this the other day around Sky News. If Sky News just acknowledged one positive thing from the left, one positive thing that they might have done, we might take what they've got to say with a little bit more, with more gravitas, a little bit more respect. It's just they are so blinded. They are very, very much blinkered to the approach that it's only one way. And I think, coming out of what happened with Donald Trump and the big day where he basically put tariffs on every single country on the globe, it would have been tough even for Sky News to find a positive out of that to be able to run with. And sure enough, they tried and they did. They tried to present something, but it really is frustrating because when you're talking to already the converted, those that have found their space at their particular streams that they align themselves with, they're stuck where they are. I think the challenge here for both parties, both Labor and Liberal, is to find the swinging voter. A good 40% of the electorate are swinging voters. They're sitting there. You've got the young vote coming through, and they're trying to find that. And that's what I think that most of the time and energy has been put into a lot of the social media and social media campaigns, because that's where they're consuming their information, and that is what's working for them. And I think we only have to look at the traditional media polls that are seeing that Labor now is starting to steam ahead. Mind you, whether it will be a minority government with the Greens, I very much doubt they'll get a standalone government on their own.
So the Greens are another interesting party as well. I mean, they obviously target a much younger audience, and they are far more easily able to adapt and communicate in those spaces that we talked about in social media, places where younger people are. Although it's interesting, if I look at a lot of younger people now, their take on social media is perhaps they use different forms of social media that, we talk about non-traditional. I mean, I would consider social media, YouTube, Facebook, and all the traditional ones. They're not really doing that. So, and the Greens, I think, I'm not a fan of the Greens. Anyone who knows me knows that, but they are clever in the way they do that.
Yeah, they are. They are. They're good. They're TikTokers. They know how to really, organise and know how to get their information out in a very short communication, and that's what the younger audiences today are looking at. They're also a lot smarter. They use humour. They use the kind of content that younger people are working with, and they're not really news driven. They're not really in the place where they're going to be strictly looking at policies. They're going to be looking at people that they like or issues that they want to be involved in. Greens frustrate me highly to the point of no end. Because they think as a minor party that they are going to, and Adam Bandt is already alerting Parliament to be on alert the fact that they will be coming in as a minority government. That frustrates me because now if you're voting Labor, you're voting Greens, and I just cannot. We've got to be very clear with this, is that if you do vote Labor, you're voting for a Green, a very heavily influenced Greens in amongst their policies moving forward. And that's not always clear because I think they're both playing very separate games, and both parties are trying to distance themselves from each other, but we all know that they're going to be benefiting from each other.
Yeah, I think, I've got a lot of friends who are Labor Party supporters or Labor Party members even who get a little bit frustrated with where they are these days, position-wise. And I see, what I think about it is, Nick, that the Labor Party that they joined back in the 70s or 80s, that's not this Labor Party. They are far more to the left. Someone like Bob Hawke, for example, was far more centrist, and really he was a great leader. I believe he was a great leader. I might not have agreed with everything he did, but I don't agree with everything that most politicians do. So, I can hate them all equally, I suppose. But I think this version of Labor now that we're seeing, not only here in Australia, but in other parts of the world too, is far different to what it might have been 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, look, it is, and it kind of has to be. It had to grow, it had to develop, it has to move into a different space to go with the crowd and go with its electorate, go with its constituents. But I agree with you. I agree with you, Steve, because the Labor Party that we knew is very different, but also so is the Liberal Party. And, we talk about the Liberal Party as being a broad church. The Liberal Party is in a complete and utter mess at the moment, not just on a federal level, but on a state level. I mean, you've only got here in South Australia, you've got the opposition Liberal Party leader had to leave because he was done for drug charges. You've got a Liberal Party in Western Australia that only last party could have had a cabinet meeting on a bicycle. There was only two of them, Steve. There was two of them. They've now got about six, so they can have a small little Tarago. They can jump into a Tarago and have a cabinet meeting. And then you've got New South Wales, where they failed to even register their councillors in New South Wales, the Liberal Party. They've got real concerns. And I think that for a healthy democracy, we really need a strong opposition. But at the moment, the way the Liberal Party is going about it is that they're going to remain in opposition for a long time moving forward. I can't see it. I had issues with Peter Dutton being the leader in the first place, and I'm sorry, I don't want to completely throw out my political beliefs, but I would have voted Liberal. But Peter Dutton, I can't vote for. I can't vote for nuclear power. And that's just, again, some of the policies that are so extreme, they actually forget the fundamental thing with voters in Australia. We all sit in the centre. We might be a little left, we might be a little right, but we're not that extreme. And you don't need to go to the left and right extremes to win a federal election. You just have to sit there in the middle. And it's the brokers from both the Conservatives and the brokers on the left that take us to these different levels that make it very difficult to vote for either party.
Seeing it here in Victoria was interesting. I know going into the last election, you would have thought with Daniel Andrews doing what he did here, and there was so much frustration with that side of politics, but it doesn't translate into the polls. And we saw the opposition leader, Matthew Guy, in the last election talking about all of these things he wanted to wind back and some leadership positions that he was taking, and it might have actually been cause for some hope. But come election time, he went straight back. He softened right off on him, went back to the centre or even to the left. And I don't think it's that Andrews or his, now Jacinda Allen won that election. I just think the Liberals lost it. They just seem to be afraid to want to take a leadership position. And when it comes to communicating that, the Labor Party are just so much better at it. There's just no doubt about that.
Yeah. I think we can't underestimate either the effect that COVID had on Victoria. I mean, Victoria was the most locked down state in not just the country, in the world. And, there was that sort of captive sort of sense and feel. A lot of people were scared right through all of that. And some of them would have seen that Andrews would have been actually more a hero than necessarily the villain. Matthew Guy is an interesting one that I think been around the Liberal Party a long, long time. The best speech that Matthew Guy gave was about a week after they'd lost the election. And that was where you went, where have you been, Matthew Guy? There was real leadership. There was someone that you could vote for. But through that entire election, nowhere to be seen, gave it up too easy. And you know what? He actually snapped that loss from the jaws of victory, because the jaws of victory were very much open there for the Liberal Party for a new opportunity, a new chance, and clean air coming out of COVID. It would have been a great chance for the Libs to have won that one.
Yeah, I know he was very strong on repealing the Pandemic Management Act at the time, which is the most egregious piece of legislation that's ever been put into the Victorian Parliament. But he went soft on it, and I'm like, you know what? Even on that issue alone, I think, and we're probably sidetracking away from the media, but this just frustrates me. I really wish he had run with that. But anyway, he didn't, and we are where we are. So, but you know what, Daniel Andrews, speaking of media, now, anyone who knows me will know, I despise him. I think he belongs in prison, personally. I have no time for him at all. But the way he and his team manage media, the way they manage messaging is, if you take away that emotional aspect of it, they are absolute masters of it. And I think that really played into that election victory for them in a big way. Now, Daniel Andrews, a lot of people may not know that, is advising Anthony Albanese and his team on media strategy for this election. And you got to say, whatever he's telling them, it's working.
Yeah, no, Steve, you're spot on. I think Dan Andrews is one of the great users of media. He and particularly with Talkback Radio. I think Talkback Radio, he completely banned himself from actually appearing on a lot of the programs because they were very hostile towards him. And when you put yourself forward and one that can at least talk through and work through some of the issues, then you come across a lot more appealing. You come across as someone that can get the job done. That just didn't happen. And Neil Mitchell particularly, I think, put in multiple requests. In fact, I think it was a weekly request that he would put in on 3AW to have the Premier on, but it just didn't work. And that's unusual because for a lot of states, they actually need, the premiers need to be able to communicate and talk to the people. Whereas in the case of Dan Andrews, he just said, no, I'll be in control of the narrative. And when he was in control of the narrative, there was less content for traditional media and even social media to be able to share around to paint a picture. He was in control of it. And it looks like what he's doing with federal Labor and in this campaign, he's doing another great job of it.
Yep, they are just masters at it, and I think if it's one thing that the conservative side of politics should do is they should study. They should go back right through all of these times, these last few years, and have a look at the way the left does it. Because, as I say, the left are very, 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 very good at it. Neil Mitchell's an interesting one. I never understood that in a way. I know Andrews has a personal dislike of the man, but putting that to one side, Neil Mitchell actually threw himself right in with the pro-lockdown crowd. He was right in with that, and he was right on message with all of that stuff. So it kind of surprises me in a way that Andrews chose not to go on his show when he is still one of the highest rating broadcasters. He was at that time, absolutely the highest rating broadcaster in this state.
Yeah, look, but I think he wouldn't be alone. Neil Mitchell wouldn't have been alone on that. I think a lot of the media were hoodwinked.
Oh, no, they all did.
And Well, they all did. And because we didn't know, no one knew what was going on tomorrow, what was going on next week, next month. So they were very much trying to toe the line. And the media did have a responsibility here to the people, because when you're in that kind of lockdown, and that's why we saw the astronomical numbers, the listening numbers, the readership of newspapers and television going, we've not seen numbers like this, where a normal 22, 24 is a 35 for 3AW. That you won't see those kind of numbers again unless some sort of national or pandemic style of issue is on, because that just won't happen. It's important that they're being able to deliver the information and deliver and make sure that everyone at that time was informed. But particularly Victoria, it was one where it became such a lockdown and became such an issue because the health system wasn't ready for it, couldn't handle it. And they did have the people listening and watching and viewing. And Neil Mitchell, it was probably the smart part of Dan Andrews, whether it's good or bad, he was still in control of the narrative, and he made sure of it. And we saw how in control he was of the narrative. Like every premier, their 11 o'clock press conference had us all sitting down watching and listening on every word. And we the people were just trying to find out what the hell was going on.
It was not good for mental health, I'll tell you that. But narratives is an interesting thing, and it doesn't matter whether it was COVID or political narratives. You've been around journalism and media for a long time, Nick. One of the things I first had to learn to deal with when I started in media back in 2008 or 9 was the concept of the media manager, or some people would call them the spin doctor. They play a very vital role. The public doesn't really see this, but when you're trying to get an interview with a politician or even a business leader, you have to, they're gatekeepers, aren't they? You really have to get through them because they want to know what's going to be asked. And I think that's maybe why they like traditional media, because traditional media people they know how to get the sound bites running, and the media spin doctors know that too.
Yeah. I've been accused of it a couple of times, Steve, of being the old spin doctor. My
apologies. I didn't know that.
Well, look, but I take it as a badge of honour, to be fair. I think it's just understanding what is required from both you as the commentator and what the journalist is actually after, and how, there is really no control in the narrative when you're dealing with media, full stop. There's a lot of hurdles that sit in front of you if you've got a message to deliver. Look, in the case of the press conferences during COVID, there were no hurdles because it was premier straight to the audience. But when you're dealing with a news service, when you're dealing with a radio program, there can be delays, there can be edits. You only have to look at the ABC and the trouble they got themselves in with when they were playing around with the editing of Robert Smith's case of extra bullets in a particular piece. It was, that's the troublesome ways. But when you are a spin doctor, when you are a media manager, someone who's responsible, you're responsible to first and foremost your client or the person that you are assigned to get the best possible result. And that is get the message out, answer the questions, don't bring what is going on into disrepute, and to be able to handle the questions in a way that still delivers to an audience and gives them the information that they need. Sometimes there's information that you just can't let out, and the way they work around it. But what frustrates me with politicians is that they get asked a question, they don't answer the question, they just resort back to their notes where they just deliver their key messages. And a good journalist will hold them up for that and get the answer that they desire.
Do you think talking to sources of media such as what we're doing here, maybe they're just too risk averse and they don't trust the people not to ask them something that they don't want to be asked, or that they don't trust the people that they're handling to be able to cope with a question that's not on notice?
Really good question. I think there's probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B there. I really do think that any good media manager is or PR is looking after, and they already know the hard questions are going to be asked. They've already drilled those questions into their clients and know that here's a response that you can give. Whether it's the response that the journalist is looking for is another thing. And, we've seen a lot of times here in media where the gotcha moment, where I've managed to capture a moment with a politician or someone that I'm interviewing, and I've got you. And sometimes there's a little bit too much emphasis on that, trying to get that, as opposed to finding out really what the audience needs and wants.
And I think that was the key message that came out of the whole Joe Rogan thing when it came to Harris versus Trump. When he got that slap back about not having Harris on, and it came out that they wanted an interview, he didn't want an interview, he wanted a conversation. And I think that's the opportunity for a form of media like this, where you and I are not having an interview now, we're just having a conversation. And I think that's a much better way of getting a message across. If people can just see who you are as a person and see that you have the ability to have a normal conversation like anyone would have across the dinner table, I think personally that is key. There's a lot of value in that, and I really hope that the media managers over time will see that too.
Yeah, I agree. Conversation and humanising, it's pretty difficult for a lot of media managers to humanise some of these politicians. They're very robotic. But those conversations are fantastic. But I will pick up on one thing. The Joe Rogan is an interesting case, because even though his podcasts on average around an hour, he's recording anything up to 3 to 4 to 5 hours of content. I think what puts the fear of God into anyone, particularly if they're not doing a live interview, is that sometimes that narrative can be changed. It can be moved around a little bit. And it's only just a slip of a word, a failure to put in a comma, and you get a whole different meaning. And look, I think if you're in politics, or if you're a leader of business, and you can talk and you can engage media in a live format, then you're going to be successful, because there's nothing more real than this. It's not edited. It's not controlled. This is humans talking to other humans, and that's what we really need more than anything. This is where I think AI is just one big balls up, is that anyone that's sort of investing too heavily in AI, try and make the human connection. Try and be real. I mean, honestly, you're going to hear me do a lot of ums and ahs and all that kind of thing, but that's human. It's the fakeness of an AI.
It's a normal part of human speech.
Absolutely, it is, and we're going to see that fall away when AI becomes perfect. And I'll give you one tip, Steve: human beings were not perfect.
Yes, that's very, very true. I'll tell you a good contrast I always found, just as we're sort of winding up here, Nick. John Howard versus Peter Costello. Howard, even to this day, can still have that conversation, whereas Costello was frustratingly on message, and that I think even back in that era was like that. But everybody's just on message now. But
look, I love the fact you brought up the Howard and Costello, because Howard, you're spot on. Howard can still roll up. They'll still roll him out for Liberal Party events and promotion, but Costello ends up becoming the chairman of Channel 9 and runs into a Channel 7 reporter and ends up losing his job. He couldn't help himself. Too confrontational, too aggressive. You can't do that.
Yeah, that's very true. There's some interesting channels around now. I see Mark Burris is doing a channel like this now. John Anderson does an excellent channel. There's a great orator, someone who can really interview and have a good conversation. So I hope that people are looking at smaller channels like mine. I mean, obviously I have a self-interest in it, but there are many, many really good channels around in Australian new media, as it's still called in some places, for them to look. And I really hope that they use take those opportunities, maybe use organisations such as Media Stable to get that message out too, Nick.
Yeah, look, Steve, I'm a big believer, as broad as, if you can take as much content as you possibly can in, be as broad, be very open to different views and opinions. One of the most frustrating thing I think with Donald Trump is, and where people get so caught up with it, is that that's all they consume. Now, that's both the people that love Donald Trump and the people that hate him. And it's like, well, you know what? Go and broaden your horizons a little. Just hear and see what others are thinking and talking about, and make up your own mind. Don't be just a follower. Get enough information out there so that you can educate yourselves to be a well-informed opinion and position, and you'll feel a lot better about it.
Yes, it's a practice of taking the emotion out of it. I had to learn that through certain leadership positions I've held in my career, and I actually find it works really well in my role as a basketball referee too. Take the emotion out of any situation when you're looking at it and try and look at it dispassionately. I know that's difficult when you're talking about someone like Donald Trump, but it's still something that people need to practice. And you'll find that people do things good and bad on both sides if you look at it that way.
Oh, they certainly do. And, at the end, it's probably the way that you behave and react to the content that's out there that is more a reflection on you than it is on them. So keep yourself well informed, and maybe sometimes don't put it out on social media. I always say this, Steve, don't put anything out on social media that you wouldn't tell your grandmother because I tell you, they get themselves in so much trouble. It's just not worth it. And
yes,
there's enough rubbish out there. Just only what you tell grandma. That's what you should be putting out there.
That's true. And never reply all when you're angry and emailing. That's probably another one. I might have learnt that through
once or twice for me.
Nick, we can find you at mediastable.com.au. Great to have you on again. Thanks so much for your time.
Good on you, Steve. Thanks very much. And let's hope for a successful election. I think the beautiful thing about living in Australia is that we get to have one and no one gets fired or shot at when they head to the polls. So we're in a very lucky country, and may the best party win.
And that's everything we have for you on this edition of The Clear Signal. And I think Nick Hayes, he summed it up just really well there at the end there. We are very lucky to live in this country. No matter what you believe politically, we all have a vote every 3 years or every 4 years, depending on where you are, and we can do that freely, even though voting, of course, is compulsory within this country. But you still do get to make that choice when you are in the privacy of the polling booth, and that is a really, really wonderful thing. The election is coming up as we record this. Don't waste your vote, folks. Whichever way you choose to send your vote, of course, I would always encourage you to, just give it some thought, really think about it, and look at the issues that matter to you most, and make an informed decision, whichever way you choose to send your vote. As Nick pointed out there, we are very lucky to live here in this part of the world, here in Australia, and it's important that we maintain our freedoms and our democracy. And, it's really a great thing that we get to exercise that periodically every 3 or 4 years. So, like I say, go out and really just give it some thought, whichever way you choose to send your vote. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much for watching, of course. And, if you're listening on the podcast feed and you're wondering about all this, talk that I've got about my new studio, well, there is a YouTube channel now. If you go to YouTube, just look it up there. The channel there is Clear Signal Media, all one word. You can find me there. And, I'm still going to produce this as a podcast. Audio is my passion. It's where it always will be at. But, hey, if you really want to look and see how bad looking I really am in real life, well, you can always look that up at Clear Signal Media there on YouTube. Love to have you along. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another edition of The Clear Signal. Until then, folks, have fun, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Get in touch. Join the conversation. Find us online at clearsignal.com.au.
Southern Skies Media.